Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Welcome, everybody, to a fresh episode of GTF, Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia, and before we get started, I want to alert everybody to our Patreon page. That's where Danny Shimon and, of course, the great Greg Gabriel are putting together scouting reports on some of the top prospects in the National Football League and also some prospects you may not have heard of. I'm going to show a little sample of one video that was recently done by Greg where he's talking about the draft profile for tight ends. Take a look at this.
You get a guy that's 6'2 to 6'4, 310 pounds, who runs pretty good, can get out into space, adjust on the moves, got athleticism and quickness. Then that's the type of guy you're looking for from a pro style standpoint. Now, there are some guys that are a little bit smaller that are great centers. And, one, you look at Kelsey for Philadelphia. He's 285 to 290. He's 36 years old. The guy, he's one of the best centers in the game and still extremely athletic. Olin played at 285 to 290 most of his career with the Bears. Another guy, very, very strong, knows how to use his hands, very explosive, but also very, very smart. So you can get away with a littler guy. The arm length isn't as important at the center position and even the guards as it is with tackles, because the leverage, you're a different game. You're not playing outside like the tackles are, where you need that length. So you can get where you want tackles to have at least 33-inch arms, you can get away with 32 to 32 and a quarter, only at 31 and a half. So, and there's going to be a guy we're going to do here that surprised me at the Senior Bowl because his arms were 31 and something, like 31 and a half, 31 and a quarter. And I was shocked because he's a big guy. But there's going to be teams that are, when you get down that low, especially for your arm length is that short, especially for a shorter guy, you're going to, you might downgrade him a little bit because you're going to really watch the tape closely then to see if he, in fact, loses leverage because of his short length.
That obviously was his profile on centers, not tight ends, as I introduced it. So my apologies for that. I was looking at the tight ends one, and I really love that one because he talks about the Y position and the U position, or whatever name teams attached to it. That's also another great profile that you can find on our Patreon page, patreon.com/barroom draft. Let me put it up on the screen for you because I know a lot of you guys have bad memories. It'll be up on the screen throughout the show. But first and foremost, let us get to the man of the hour, the man of the day, the man of the week, the man of the month, Greg Gabriel. How are you, my friend?
How much do I owe you for that?
I owe you. Trust me. How was your weekend?
Not bad. I had to take the dog to the vet on Saturday, so he was pissed at me.
Oh, gosh. Anything wrong, or is he okay?
No, he's okay. Yeah, a little, we thought he might have had an eye infection, and it turned out it was just a little inflammation. It was no infection. But, this dog was a rescue dog. Mm-hmm. And he's not little. He's 100 pounds. So, but he does not, when I take him in the car, he associates going in the car to going somewhere bad. It's not like we go, we're not going in the car to go to the ice cream store. Yeah. Right. You're going to take me to get groomed. You're taking me to the vet, something like that. So it's like, I pick up his leash. I go, Bennett, come on, let's go. And he looks and he sees it. He goes, no, I don't think so. And he goes hiding under the table, because he just figures it out. And then you get, and he won't even, when I come into the garage, pull the car in the garage, he will not come out to greet me. Does my wife all the time. Won't come out to greet me because I'm the asshole that always has to take him in the car for the bad stuff. My wife won't do it. So she's the good guy.
That's hilarious. Bennett is probably how much does Bennett weigh? About I'm guessing
he weighed at even 100 on Saturday.
Wow. I haven't had a dog. I don't think I've ever had a dog that big.
Well, we had a yellow lab for 14 years, and he was about 85, and I thought he was a big dog. This dog might not be quite as tall as the lab was. I mean, an inch difference, but he's just so thick. He's got mastiff in him. What the hell was the movie Tom Hanks was in? Turner and Hooch?
Yeah.
Okay. His body, not his head, his body is like Hooch. Just big, massive, muscular body. And then he's got a head like a lab or something like that, and he's white, yellow color. So you don't know he's mastiff. I had the DNA done, and he's
cool.
Yeah, he's got a lot of mastiff in him.
He's a great dog. I got a chance to meet him. And let's talk about some other great stuff that happened this weekend. You got into a Twitter controversy with someone that kind of inspired you for the topic of today. Scheme fits when drafting players, when acquiring players. There's a lot of people out there who will look at, like for instance, DeJuan Jones. This guy right here, I'm going to put up his image on the screen. DeJuan Jones is a guy that a lot of people on Twitter are saying, we really need to draft this guy. He's massive. He'd be a great right tackle. But there's a problem for him, isn't it, Greg? This guy's not a scheme fit.
He can't play in space. He's not athletic enough. The scheme, and contrary to what a lot of people want to think, and there's this one person who, it's like, well, if a coach can't fit a guy into a scheme, the coach is bad. That's the biggest bunch of bullshit I've ever heard in my life. The whole National Football League revolves around scheme and scheme fit. Every team in the league, 32 teams, has a profile for every position. They draft players that fit their scheme. So they brings up, well, what about Greg Olson? Greg Olson had nothing to do with scheme fit and everything to do with a coach being stubborn about the use of a player, because Greg Olson wasn't a good blocker. So because he wasn't a good blocker, he wasn't going to play in my scheme. But it wasn't fit because there's other coaches who've coached that scheme that used a tight end extensively. In fact, Lovey's first year here, Terry Shea was the offensive coordinator. Terry Shea learned that offense from Mike Martz. And we used the tight end a lot. We had a guy named Desmond Clark at the time, if you recall.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty damn good tight end in his day. And, it was with Greg Olson, it was strictly a stubborn coach who refused to come out of the dinosaur era. And saw that, people can say what they want, but everything, you have different kind of, and a lot of it, let me back up a little bit. A lot of it when we talk scheme fit has to do with alignment on both sides of the ball. You can play with the skill people a little bit because of their talent level. But with alignment, in order for the thing to work, you got to have the linemen that fit within the scheme. And when you're going to play an outside zone scheme, those suckers, especially the tackles, better be able to run. They better be agile enough to adjust on the move and be able to hit a moving target in space with a productive block. Okay, well, why do you think they didn't go after Orlando Brown in free agency? Because he can't do that. It has nothing to do with Orlando Brown's talent and his value. He cannot do that within that scheme. And he's never been able to do it. He's played in an entirely different kind of blocking scheme his entire career. And he's very good in it. But, he's going to play for the teams that do what he can do best. not try to put, and I hate the square peg round hole thing, but really that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. And we've talked a couple of times before on GTF about the great quote from Bill Parcells about acquiring exceptions.
I've used that, I think, 5 times in the last few weeks.
It's perfect.
It is. I mean, Bill said, you start drafting or signing exceptions, you're going to have a team full of exceptions and lose.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
You don't put exceptions on your football team.
Right. And so if you draft a guy like DeJuan Jones, you now what you're asking the 4 other guys on the offensive line is greatly impacted by the fact that you've got an exception over at the right tackle.
You got to change your whole running game.
The whole thing, yeah.
Your whole running scheme has to change because one guy can't do it.
Yep, exactly. And there's probably in the history of the draft, there aren't many players who are worthy of having a whole scheme fit because you're acquiring this one special player. Like, for instance, Lawrence Taylor is a guy who's, if he's available in the draft, yeah, okay, I might consider changing some of my defense to get this guy free and rush the quarterback.
He can play in anything.
That's true.
Okay. There are a lot of players that can do that. They can play anything. But don't forget, I'm emphasizing the fact that a lot of this has to do with the line, both lines. Okay. And you can work your way around other areas. Like just the game changes a little bit. Let's take linebackers, for example. It used to be that we wanted big linebackers and speed wasn't that important. You'd want a Mike linebacker, and the Bears just signed a Mike linebacker that's huge, but he also runs a 4.50, like Brian Urlacher did. But for the most part, if you look at the linebackers that are getting drafted now, they're smaller and they're faster. Why? Because most of the time defenses are in a sub package. And those guys on the field got to know how to cover. And you can't have, unless he's an exceptional athlete, like the Bears just signed, you can't get that with a big 250-pound guys. You got to get it with a 220, 230. Roquan Smith was 227 pounds when he got drafted.
Wow.
But he ran a 4.51. The guy down in Leonard down in the Colts with the Colts. Another guy, he was 215 when he came out of college, but he could run like a deer. but he can cover. So it's sometimes your profiles change because the game has changed, but you're not going to change the overall philosophy of your scheme. Eberflus hired Luke Ketze. He brought in a couple guys to interview for the offensive coordinator position. But he came in when he interviewed for the head coaching job, he stated that I want a guy that knows, for lack of a better term, the Green Bay scheme. But it's really Green Bay, San Francisco, Los Angeles Rams. It's Shanahan's scheme. And he said because he has found that scheme to be the most difficult scheme for him as a defensive coordinator to defend. So that's what he wants his offense running. But he also brought in a good friend of mine, interviewed him, Pep Hamilton. Pep's got a real good offense. And he's an excellent coach. But it's not similar to what Getze does. And he, Flus specifically wanted a guy that was proficient with that scheme. So with that scheme means you have to draft certain players that can play within that scheme. And if some clowns out there don't want to agree with it and don't want to get up with the times and figure out, oh, that's how it works. Hey, I feel sorry for you. Go bury your head in the fucking toilet.
That's hilarious. Got some great questions from the chat regarding this topic of scheme fits. Let me start with Nathan Campbell. Nathan asked, due to scheme fit, could you see Double A from Northwestern being drafted at number 9? And that is, of course, Adetamiwa Adabore from Northwestern, a highly touted prospect who, in many draft boards, he was a second rounder, maybe even third rounder. But in some boards now, and these are not from football teams, but from draft publications and so forth, he's been in some first round mocks. What do you think about Double A from Northwestern and his scheme?
Well, a 9 is he doesn't have enough production, and
Yes.
and he is a projection.
Mm-hmm.
To be, because he did play, and so to be still you could he go in the first round? Yeah, he could. Will he? I don't know. I think I use this proverbial 20 to 40 type. I think that's where he falls, in that you get a lot of players that have about the same value, and it's going to be what teams prefer. So if he went 21st, it wouldn't shock me. If he went 39th, it wouldn't shock me, because they're all going to be literally about the same value.
Yep, I get you. And you're absolutely right. There was a little bit of a breakup when you were speaking there, but the one thing that concerns me about Double A is that lack of production, as you mentioned, and that's probably because Northwestern played him out of position at the defensive end position as opposed to the middle. So there has to be a lot of projection with this guy. Now, given his size and what he can do you think that there's going to be several teams in the NFL who are not going to have him on the board, at least for the first 2 rounds?
Yeah, there's going to be some 3-4 teams that, play a 5-tech and want a bigger guy, even though he's pretty damn strong now. I mean, he did 28 reps, I think. He's real quick. He played basically a 5 or a wide 5 at Northwestern, but he's still 6'1.5", 6'1 and 3/4. He's got long arms. He's got over 34-inch arms. The comp, and I'm not saying is as good as, but I'm saying the comp, the body type, the speed, the athleticism, and actually got more speed, is Aaron Donald.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's the same with Kalijah Cansey from Pitt. Right. The problem with Cansey that teams will have to overcome is his arm length. He's got alligator arms. Not taken away from his film. His film is outstanding against college players. But his arms are 30 5/8 inches. His arms are a full 2 inches shorter than Aaron Donald's. Tommy Harris had 32.5-inch arms. Aaron Donald's got 32.5-inch arms. That's fine for being an interior defensive lineman. You don't have to have 35-inch arms or whatever. But now what you get down to 30 5/8, that's a different story. And so it's going to be really a decision that a combination of your coaches and your personnel staff got to sign off on the guy. Now,
Right.
It's interesting. Well, now not Clancy, but with Double A, being that he's from Northwestern, they can bring him into Hallis Hall 10 times if they want to, and it doesn't count against the 30 visits because he's local. And the same with Skoronski. The same with the wide receiver from Michigan State. These guys are all local kids. The wide receiver, the slot receiver, Charlie Jones from Purdue. He's from Deerfield. These guys, if the Bears want to bring them in 10 times, they can. And the other schools that, they did this, I think it was the year Trubisky came out. Might have been the year before. They changed the rules a little bit. Used to be you could only bring in local guys, designated local guys. Otherwise, and you couldn't work them out unless they were specifically local guys local guys counted as like Northwestern also.
Mm-hmm.
But then they changed the rule, got a little more liberal with it, and they gave each team some designated local schools. Okay, so the Bears have Northwestern, obviously, because they're right here. They got Illinois. Ordinarily, under the old rules, Illinois, it's a 3-hour drive. They're not going to be within that limit to be called local. Northern Illinois is, hour and a half out, a little closer to from where you live, but they're going to, they wouldn't be in it. Notre Dame is a local school for the Bears. So you can bring those guys in as much as you want. And like the Colts have Purdue, Ball State, the University of Indiana. I don't know who their other local school is, but it's every team in the league has got a series of local schools that they can bring in, and they count as local people. So, they don't count against your 30-man limit for visits. You can work them out whenever you want. The only thing you can't do is in the last week leading up to the draft, you can't bring anybody in. You can go work them out of their place, but you can't bring them into your place.
Yeah. Greg, you sort of answered this question from Jeremy in that response, but I'd like to dig further. He asked, does any athletic defensive lineman fit RD? And so you basically answered that when you were talking about physical traits, like you want a defensive end with longer arms. So he would not be a fit. For instance, let's talk about Kalijah Cansey, the 3-tech defensive lineman, who I think is an interesting prospect. His speed and quickness would be an ideal fit for this defense, but are his arms too short for the Bears to consider?
Well, that I said that's going to get down to a coaching and personnel department.
Yeah.
Thing. You do a it's me. If I didn't go to the pro day, I'm doing a private workout. If you sent the defensive line coach who could spend some time with them in a private workout, that'll work too. Excuse me. I've had this cough going on for a couple days.
You need a little rum and tea.
I don't have any rum here, so better make a run to the liquor store. Make a run to the liquor store.
For rum.
I got bourbon, though.
There you go. That's second place right there.
So that's the coach's call. Coach might say, you know what? He's not perfect, but I can live with him.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Let's see. We've got Lee Bruin asking the question. So for scheme fit, would Greg say who are the top 5 fits for offensive and defensive linemen and any sleepers?
I don't have my list right in front of me, but I can tell you right off the bat, linemen that fit: Parrish, Johnson fits,
Anton Harrison,
Broderick Jones, Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse. All those guys are really good fits. Mm-hmm. The guy that I'm up and down on is Wright from Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Wright has straight line speed, 501, 502, something like that. But he doesn't, when he plays on tape, he doesn't look very agile. And he's a little bit straight-legged. And so, I would, it's me, I'm sending my O-line coach out to work him out and let him get firsthand feel and let him go thumbs up or thumbs down. We used to do that when Harry was here. And we sent Harry out to work out a lot of offensive linemen. And not only would Harry was there's a lot of coaches that aren't good evaluators, and there's some that are outstanding. And the difference is, do they want to do it? There's some coaches that they want to coach, but they let the scout now coach. But there's other guys that get really into it. They work hard at it. They put a lot of time in it. John Hoke was the new corners coach for the Bears. He's an excellent evaluator. Harry was an excellent evaluator. But Harry would go out and he'd spend 4 or 5 hours with a guy. And he'd get him on the board. He'd work him out, take him out to lunch, all that. He'd get to know the kid. And he'd come back, and he might say, I like the player. I don't want him on our team, though. Why not? I don't think he's going to fit in the room.
Mm-hmm.
He'll get, and at that time, the room was, John Tate, Olin, Roberto Garza, Reuben Brown, Fred Miller. He had some strong personalities in there, and so he wanted guys that were going to fit within those personalities in his room. And if he thought that they weren't going to be fits personality-wise, he'd just say, hey, I don't want them. And the one thing I've learned in this league is you can never shove a player down a coach's throat. The coach will find a way for that guy to fail.
Yep.
So you got to have the coach on board. He's got to be enthused about coaching this guy.
Yeah. I'm glad that you've confirmed my suspicions about that, because in my decades of watching football, I always had the sense that certain coaches were like, I don't really want this player on my team. I'm not going to help him succeed. We may have seen that with Matt Nagy and Mitchell Trubisky. He tried at first, but when he couldn't adapt to Nagy's offensive scheme, he really gave up on him. Some more great questions from the chat. Let's see. Greg, at what point in the scouting process does the scout team say he's not a fit? Do they just ignore that person now, or do you still do due diligence on that player? We've talked about this briefly, and I think it's a great question to go over again.
We eliminate a lot of guys in our December meetings.
That early? Wow.
That the December meetings would last a week, and you wouldn't spend more than a couple minutes on every player. And it's the area scout that does most of the talking, because he knows the player the best. And if he deems the player to not be a fit or a character risk or whatever, we slap a grade on him and put him to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Give him a shot in the arm and he's dies somewhere. But we have a way of bringing them back to life.
Mm-hmm.
There is reincarnation, and that is if somebody like Jerry or myself, see the guy in an all-star game and go, wait a minute, they're wrong. We got to take another look. And there's been players that we've done that with. So it's not an absolute, but that's how you do it. But in most cases, when you get now, you've already eliminated. Now you're getting into final meetings. And we'll start talking about that in a minute. But now that you don't even have them on the board. You have different boards. You have one board that's off to the side that's strictly best to worst by position, and everybody's in there. You might have 1,000 names on that board, but that doesn't mean you're going to draft them. That's just a list of names, because the Houston Texans or the Dallas Cowboys or somebody may draft one of those guys. Because remember this, no two boards are alike. And players that are fits for one team aren't going to be fits for another team, and vice versa.
Right.
And so, you just go like the one guy. Like I cannot see, I've seen how do you say the guy's name? Akaye from Baylor, the big defensive tackle.
Yeah.
He's about 360 pounds.
Right.
Okay. Well, he shows some quickness on tape. He is not going to be a Chicago Bear. I'd like fall over dead if the Bears take it. He is so far away from being a scheme fit for this defense, because he just doesn't have. He's a 3-4 guy, and you put him in a 3-4 defense, and he's going to be pretty damn good. But he can't play in a one-gap scheme like the Bears play here and be a penetrator and be a disruptor and be an interior pass rusher. It's not his game.
Yeah. Siaki Ika, the big guy from Baylor. This guy is huge indeed. 358 pounds is how
And he's a
the
good player. I'm
yeah.
not taking anything away. But you won't have the point I'm making is that when you get to draft day, his name's not going to be on the board.
Right.
He's on the sideboard
Mm-hmm.
because somebody's going to draft him. Somebody may take him in the second or third round, but he's not going to be on your board. Let's get into that because a lot of teams are starting their meetings this week. The ones that don't start this week will start next week. Regardless, even if you start this week, they'll probably shut down after Thursday, give everybody a long Easter holiday weekend, and then resume next Monday or Tuesday. Probably next Monday afternoon. Let's do next Monday afternoon. Your draft. Go over by now. When I was with New York, it was totally different, and the way we did it then is outdated now. We would put our board together best to worst. We went down into the basement of Giant Stadium, and there's nobody around, and do the number one guy, then we do the number two guy. And then, you get to the number three guy, and then you start arguing, who would you rather have, this guy or the guy we just did before? And you do that. We call it climbing the ladder. And we do that. You get through, at that time, when I started there was 28 teams. So your first round had 28 players. Your second round had 28 players. Your third round had, and there was no compensatory picks then either. So there was 12 rounds back then too. So you had 12 rounds of 28. And we do it one at a time, and it took a few weeks to get the thing done, and it was got kind of monotonous. And when I came here, and everybody's doing it this way, I can't say everybody, but most are, you're doing it by position. Okay, and you're ranking your position. Let's say you start off with defensive ends, and you rank your defensive ends, and then you got groupings of guys. These are guys we'd consider as first round picks. These are guys we'd consider as second round picks. We used to have a letter grade on them that determined the draft value as far as, if it was an A player, he'd be a guy you could take in the first or second round. Then he'd have a number next to it. And you can change the grades a little bit in these last meetings because now, up until these meetings, when you had meetings in February, you had meetings in December, there's no coaches involved. Coaches are coaching them. They haven't been involved in the scouting process, evaluation process. But now you get into these meetings and the coaches have been involved. They've been involved, say, since the 1st of February, maybe the last All-Star game, the week of the Senior Bowl, the East-West game. And they're not doing all the players at their group. They might be doing 15, 20 players or whatever, and at their position group, but they have an opinion. The coordinator has an opinion. The head coach has an opinion. So you put that all together, and generally speaking, a final grade isn't going to be as high as the best grade. It's not going to be as low as the worst grade. It's going to be somewhere in the middle, but it's going to be a grade that everybody in the room agrees with, and this is the right spot for him. But you do that, you put that together, best to worst at, by position. But what we used to do, we were only talking about guys we liked. So if he wasn't a fit, we weren't even talking about him. We talked about him in February. We talked about him in December. We're not talking about him now because we're not drafting him. Why waste your time talking about a guy? Time's too important.
Yep.
So, and then you'd set the board that way. Now you've got, so it's you got your defensive ends here, then you got your defensive tackles here, your inside linebackers, outside linebackers, corners, and safeties. And they're then put across at levels by grade and typing. So you could have, depending on your numbering system, let's say you've got 4 different players with you're high in the first round. You got, and I'm just making up stuff here. 4 different players with a 7.2 grade on, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Their grade says they're equal. Okay, but you've already, in the course of these meetings, you've had discussions on prioritizing. I'd rather have this guy over this guy. And again, there has to be agreement. Now, the GM always has final say, so he can pull rank and say, I want this guy. End of discussion. He's getting paid the big bucks, and he has the final say, and it's basically he's the one being held accountable on the picks. But it's a fascinating, it's a fun process, and it's a fascinating process.
It is.
And it goes on for days.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, one at a time. And when you get done with that, then you start getting into strategy. Okay, how are we going to handle this thing? Now, the GM's always thinking that. And when he might bring in his hierarchy, like polls would maybe bring in, Ian and maybe their scouting director or whatever. And they talk privately, but not within the group, about how they want to strategize. But when you talk within the group, then you're letting them know how you think, but you're again trying to get everybody on the same page. This is what we think we want to do in the first round. And remember what I've said before. You always got to be prepared for the worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be prepared. Okay, we're sitting at 9, and we thought at 9 that, and again, I'll just make this up. We thought we'd have a chance at Paris Johnson or Broderick Jones. One of those 2 are going to be there, so we're going to be happy. We're going to get a tackle. Okay, and now one goes off at 6, the other one goes off at 8, and it comes to 9, and you're holding your pud. So, you've got to have a plan for that. You've got to be prepared, and you have to discuss it before you get into the draft.
Mm-hmm.
It's what it's in those final days leading up to the draft. That's what you discuss. And so, the thinking that is, okay, look, guys we want aren't there, so we're going to trade down. But you don't make that decision Thursday night with 12 minutes on the clock. Mm-hmm. You've made that decision days before. Mm-hmm. And you're going to call teams in the days. Usually the call. I used to be the guy making the calls. I'd make them. It used to be for a while that before they went to Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It used to be Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And when I started in this league now, the draft was on Tuesday. It started at 7:00 in the morning, and we'd end about 4:00 in the morning the next day. And he had 12 rounds. It was crazy. But with the draft on Saturday, I'd start making calls on Wednesday. And we had a line drawn. Okay, if we trade down as far as we want to go is X amount. Let's say, we'll just use this year as an example. Let's say they're at 9. Say, okay, look, we'll go down to 15. Mm-hmm. Or we'll go down to 16, but I don't want to go further than that. So then I'd call 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And I'd just say, real short and sweet conversation. You don't get into specifics. Hey, let's say one was Pittsburgh and it's Kevin Colbert at the time. Kevin, there's a couple guys we like. They may not be there. If they're not there, we may be willing to move. Just want to let you know in case you're thinking about moving up. And you go, okay, that's great to know. Thanks. Bye. That's the discussion. Okay. And then you get into draft night. And because you've let teams know, now you get to 6. You're at 9. You get to 6. Now your phone's starting to ring. You guys still want to move? Well, we want to come up. And I guarantee you'll get 3, 4, 5 calls.
Okay.
You might even get one from 22 or 23 or something that's way back.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to give you a huge package. But if you let it out that you're willing to move, you will get calls.
Mm-hmm. And somebody just posted Nomad. It said if Anthony Richardson gets drafted first, as there been rumors to that, some really interesting things may trigger in the Bears' favor. That would be a fascinating scenario.
I tell you what I don't see, because some people hit me with this over the weekend. What if there's a quarterback there at 9? I don't think there's any way. Could I be wrong? Yeah. But I don't think there's any way in hell there's going to be a quarterback available at 9. Those 4 are coming off the board long before the Bears are even thinking about making there. They're still going to be, eating their potato chips and popcorn and having a sandwich and enjoying the first few picks of the draft.
Chris Watts asks, how civil are teams with each other on draft day? Do you get people calling up and say, what the fuck are you doing? I thought you were going to. And by the way, that reminds me of the Ravens-Bears controversy. Somebody posted it up in the chat back in 2011. Jerry Angelo admitted that he made a mistake about a potential trade or something like that. Do you recall that?
Yeah, I that was the year after I was gone.
Okay.
Yeah, they made a tentative deal with Baltimore and backed out. And Baltimore was pissed.
They wanted a compensatory pick.
Yeah, well, they weren't going to get that. I mean, because you know what, the trade's got to go down. But a deal's not a deal until it's called in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Right.
It was never called in.
Right.
But they had committed to it, and then. And you know what? They should have traded it, because I don't know who the hell Baltimore wanted, but they took Karimi, and Karimi ended up having bad knees.
Yeah.
And whether they knew about it before, I don't know. Usually you do. For most cases, but in this particular case, there were some issues I think they didn't know about. But I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't there then. Wait a minute, to go back to the one question.
Sure.
Are you civil? Of course you're civil. You're spending time, especially like the scouts, and you read some of the stuff. Like there's a really nice article in The Athletic today about how the trade went down between Carolina and the Bears for the number 1 pick. These guys are all friends,
Mm-hmm.
and there's scores of guys around the league that are friends of mine, have been friends of mine for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
You gonna be an asshole with them? Of course not.
Right. And they could be future employers or future
right.
coworkers.
No, you always treat people with the utmost respect.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't make a deal, you can't make a deal. But and I remember the year we traded down, it was 2006, and we traded out of the first round because that was the year we took Devin, and that was our plan going in. We had our pick was 28 or something like that, and we knew we weren't going to use that pick. We didn't like what we were going to be looking at to begin with. When we were looking at the board and figuring out who was going to go where, in the meetings leading up. So we figured that we wanted to trade out, which we did. We had 6 teams calling us, one of which was the Colts, and Bill Polian was there. And Bill got a little pissed because he wanted to make the deal. And he's like, well, what do I got to do to get the deal? I go, I got some better deals. What is it? I'll match it. And it's like, I'm sorry, we're doing it with Buffalo. But he wanted, he got a little pissy, but that's his personality. So you knew that, some people are like that.
Yeah. Let's entertain this question from Free Palestine. I think he's referring to Cedric Benson here. Are the rumors true that Cedric's agent told the Bears staff not to draft them because of salary?
No.
Yeah, I never heard that before.
No truth to that at all.
Yeah.
Eugene Parker was his agent. And
somebody Eugene, you know quite well, right?
Yeah, Eugene was one of my close friends in the world, and his son is a good friend. Mm-hmm. And there was never any truth to that at all. Now, Eugene always was a hard guy. I got to say this right. Eugene always had a dollar figure in his mind, what a guy was worth.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't budging off of that. And so you had to work. And you know what? Cliff and Eugene were good friends.
Mm-hmm.
They got along very well. But you knew going in that the negotiation wasn't going to be easy. And that it was gonna take time. It's just, it's the nature of business. Now, he had Devin. And with Devin, even when we did the extension with Devin, it was easy. Because we're both on the same page with the number.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, they didn't lie like they have now. With the first round, where you got slotted into a number.
Yeah. Huh. You froze there a little bit, but we're back. All right, let's tackle some more questions. This one just came in, and it's somewhat breaking news because I had not seen this before. It appears that Carter's agent, who is Drew Rosenhaus, I'm sorry, are you there? Okay. Carter's agent, Drew Rosenhaus, says that Carter will not be visiting teams that are outside the top 10. What do you think about that move by Drew Rosenhaus?
I think he's full of shit. And I know Drew, and I love him. He's a very good agent. But what he says publicly and what he does are two different things. That's that is saying my guy's going in the top 10. So why do I need to?
Right.
He's trying to use his knowledge, so to speak, even if some of it's fake knowledge. Hey, I've got teams have told me that if he's there, they're taking him. So if you're sitting below 10, forget about it. You're not going to get him. I think as you get, you can bring guys in until the week before. The draft is on Thursday, the 27th. The previous Wednesday is the last day. What's that, the 19th? I don't have a calendar in front of me. That's the last day you can bring guys in. Now you can go visit them down. You can go down to Athens, Georgia, and visit them there. Mm-hmm. You can do that day before the draft if you want, but you can't bring them into your facility. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems like, there could be teams that are considering trading into the top 10 for Jalen Carter, but if he's refused to meet with them, then that might not happen.
Well, no, Drew's been around a long time, and he's a good agent. He's a very good agent.
One of the best, no doubt.
And he knows how to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And if a team sitting at 14 has an idea of, and I don't know who's at 14. I don't have the list in front of me, but if a team at 14 is considering that, they're going to call him up. Hey, Drew, I might trade up to you.
Okay.
They're going to tell. Like any team that wants to talk to Jalen Carter is going to talk to him. Whether they bring him in for a visit or they go down to see him in Athens, Georgia, they're going to talk to him.
By the way, it's the Patriots who are drafting 14. I don't see them moving up for Jalen Carter, but you never know. All right, several really good questions here. Let's see if we can fit them in. Any chance you guys are going to be talking about Colby Wooden, the defensive tackle from Auburn? Jimmy Toney thinks that he could be a really good 3-tech, and so I called up our page here from NFL.com on Kobe. I frankly have not seen anything about him. Have you, Greg?
I had to do him for that agency that I do some work for.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't, and I'll go back and do some more. Mm-hmm. He's really more of an outside guy. I don't see him having the bulk and the strength. The other guy is pretty damn good. The other defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
I think this guy's kind of average. I don't think he's a real fit for this scheme, but because somebody wants to know for sure, let me write the name down.
Yeah.
And I'll do some more stuff.
Colby Wooden. Yeah.
From Auburn.
All right. Nomad wants to know, how busy does Greg think the after draft free agent market will be? I gotta believe it's going to be super busy, huh?
Well, it's always busy, but you don't wait until after the draft. You're starting making calls. Well, let me go back. In our 30 visits, at least 10 of them were prospective UDFAs.
Mm-hmm.
And one reason being is we knew there was an outside chance we could draft him, and we wanted to get the medical. But the other reason was we wanted to recruit him.
Mm.
And by bringing them in, they got to meet not only with myself and with Jerry, but they got to meet with Lovey. They got to meet with the coordinator on their side of the ball and the guy and their position coach. The guy who's going to be coaching them. We'd all recruit the hell out of the kid and say, this is the plan. Hey, look it, Tommy, I'm sorry, we're not going to draft you. I know you don't want to hear that, and it's probably a bummer to you, but I'm just being honest with you. We don't have a draftable grade with you on you, but we want you on our football team. And
Great.
we want you as an undrafted free agent, and then you start selling them. And you're going to get a lot of those guys because you built a relationship, and then you start selling the agent, because the agent, a lot of times the agent's just looking at the signing bonus,
Right.
because he's getting a percentage of that, but the kid's got to sign off on it, and so you got to sell the kid too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a combination. But so we'd do it. We'd start bringing in the kids. It would be right around this time of the year, 3.5 weeks, 2.5 to 3.5 weeks before the draft. We'd bring them all in the same day, and we'd have a dinner for them and everything. And then now when you're getting up to the days before the draft, so the draft is on Thursday, so starting, say, Monday, you're calling them. You call them Tuesday, you call them Wednesday. Tommy, I'm thinking about you. I love you, man. And we want you on the team. I hope somebody drafts you. I really do. But if it happens that it doesn't work out, we want you on the Bears. And you just sell them. And then you get to Saturday, and it's in the 6th round.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy's not drafted yet. Tommy, we still love you, man. And we want you. And now you're calling his agent. And in a public forum, I probably shouldn't say this. But
Oh, go ahead.
you're not supposed to make deals until after the draft ends.
That's right.
Yeah, well, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So, you're getting the parameters of deals done. Hey, you rip it up if the guy gets drafted.
Right.
That
is hilarious. Love the way that operates. No problem.
Yeah, so that's a fun process too. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, the majority of UDFAs are signed within 2 hours of the draft. Mm-hmm. You might not hear that, and hear all the names, but within 2 hours. I mean, you'll have guys sign. Let's say the draft ends at 2:30. By 3, you're going to have 8 or 9 done.
Mm-hmm. I got to ask you about Tuli Tuipulotu. I know you love his motor. I know you like him. Where do you see him playing? That question was submitted by Nathan Campbell. What do you think about Tuli Tuipulotu?
I still think he's a 3.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised by his weight. What I'd want to find out, which I don't know because I never made a school call. Okay, he weighed 266 at the combine. I think he was 69 at the USC Pro Day. He was listed in the media guide for USC at 290.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm an area scout, and you always get this stuff during the year when you make school calls, is I'm finding out what he played at during the year. You know, did he in fact drop 20 pounds so he could run a step faster at the combine? Okay, and if he legitimately weighed 285 plus during the season for USC, he's a 3. First of all, his arms are too short to be an end.
Right.
You know, he's got 32 and a quarter inch arms.
Right.
That discounts him from being an end for most teams. Play a 5 technique, he could be a 5 and a 3-man front. But for the Bears, he'd be a 3 if, in fact, they feel that number one, he played at a heavier weight. Number 2, he can carry that weight without being fat. You know, have good lean weight.
Right. Good stuff. Let's get back to the questions here. Michael, this one's going to get you mad, Greg. Michael Hallentak, my good buddy. With the success of Braxton Jones, do you think Poles grabs JS?
No. It ain't happening. Why do people keep bringing that up? I mean, you know, you've got in this draft alone, you've got a 2nd-round pick in Chase Claypool, and you've got DJ Moore, who is really another one in this draft on the wide receiver position. And you've got Mooney. So when's JSN getting on the field?
Maybe a year 2.
No, I mean, he's going to be your number 4.
Yeah, I hear you.
And you know, Ryan Poles told me in our conversation at the East West, and he said, hey, if I had to do that trade all over again, it'd take me about 3 seconds to decide. They didn't do it for last year. They did it for this year. Yeah. They knew that it was going to take time. The offense is hard to learn. And let's talk about JSN a little bit.
Okay.
He didn't exactly, you know, he had a real good 3-cone at the combine. He ran 4.52. And don't anybody try to tell me, no, they said 4.48. I got the times. He ran 4.52 when he ran one time.
Yep.
And that time went out to all 32 teams.
Yeah. And as Nomad says, you can throw Bijan Robinson in that group of players that are not going to be drafted at number 9 by the Chicago Bears.
You don't take a 1-contract player in the top 10. I mean, it's you used to. 20 years ago, you did. You don't anymore. It's a different game.
Robert seems to remember that you have said some negative stuff about JSN. What have you heard about him that you'd like to share?
Well, just that, you know, is he all in? There's a lot of people who thought he could play during the year, and that he's protecting himself. And so that tells me diva. And then, and also, he was expecting to be the guy. Now, he did have a little ham pull in that first game against Notre Dame, but all of a sudden, this guy named Marvin Harrison Jr. jumped to the top and is a far better player than JSN could ever think about being. And he becomes the number 2. Then they had another guy who got his chance to play, and he was pretty damn good too. He wasn't going to get the targets. You know, this guy in the games he played in 3 games, he caught 4 passes. And people wonder, oh, my hand just doesn't feel good. I can't play. Yeah, right. Give me a fucking break. Hamstrings don't take 3 months to heal.
Yep. All right. Nathan has a great question. So what 3 tech would you take at number 9? There
isn't one.
Yeah, I said I was going to.
I mean, there's Jalen. I don't think, you know, I'm just going on what Poles has said, and especially in an interview last week out in Phoenix, where he said, there will be a time when I feel the locker room is right that you can bring in some people that you have questions about. Yeah, because your locker room can control it. I don't think he feels his locker room's at that level yet.
Mhm.
And now, saying all that, he's in today. And how that goes will have a huge bearing on their final decision.
Right.
They could come out and say, you know what? If he's there, we'll take him today. Based on, and let me tell you, that's not going to be a fun interview for him. He's going to get hammered to death.
Yeah.
And how he reacts and relates to those questions, how he answers those questions, that's going to be very, very important, because they're going to shut the door this afternoon. They're going to have their decision made.
Wow. And you don't see a scenario where they might trade up to acquire Carter, do you?
I don't see there's any sort of they trade up, period.
Yeah.
I
don't.
Would baffle me. I mean, could it? Yeah, I just don't see it. Somehow get up. There, we're back. If it's trading down in the first to do that, or just having to trade up with one of those twos to get in that top portion of the second, because there's some really good players in that top half of the second round.
Yep, I've been praying for that too. A higher second round pick would be really, really great. Has the injury thing with Tyree Wilson made him lose some of his luster? King Booker World wants to know. Tyree Wilson's doctor released a letter saying, everything looks fine, but we've asked him not to work out for 2 or 3 weeks because of perspiration on the scar and blah, blah, blah.
They took out the screws that were in there.
Okay. Okay.
I think we talked about this once before.
We did, yes.
And when I see a doctor make a statement, I'm a little leery. Because it's not, and now in saying that, the doctor he had is way up here. He's very highly thought of. Very, very good surgeon. One of the best in the country, if not the best. But still, to put that out and release it, that tells me, and I could be totally off base here, so that things didn't go according to plan, so to speak, at the combine. And that doesn't mean 32 teams saw it that way. Could be 3 or 4 didn't like the way it was healing or whatever, because the medical exams are like scouting reports. They vary, and it's how the experience that medical staff has with certain type of injuries and how players at certain positions come back from those injuries. That often has a lot to do with what their final grade's going to be on a guy.
Right.
When we're going to find out on him, we're going to find out. You're not going to get a workout on him. You're going to find out on draft night. And if all of a sudden he starts falling, it's because regardless of the letter, there's teams that didn't feel real good about that injury or the surgery or whatever.
Michael Haltek has another question. Poles talked about Braxton Jones being bigger and stronger after his work this offseason. What do we know about Larry Borum and Alex Leatherwood? Have your sources told you anything about their offseason work?
No, and they can go into Hallis and work. They can work with the strength coach. They can't, under the CBA, they can't really do any football stuff with their position coach, or they can work out on their own somewhere. There's some places around town that if guys who live here, they go to those. Olin has a place that some guys work at, and there's a place I think down in Deerfield that other guys go to. and work on specific stuff. Braxton Jones, I think he's going to be a hell of a left tackle, but I also realize that depending on who they take at tackle, he could very well end up on the right side. If they took Paris has actually 2 years experience. First 2 years in college, he was a right guard, backup right tackle, and a starting right guard. So he's played the right side. So there is no positional switch. It wouldn't be difficult for him to make that change, having played left tackle last year. You take Jones from Georgia. Now, he's a pretty damn good left tackle. And if it's me, I might just keep him there. Because, he's real nifty. He's got the size. He's got the demeanor. So I think it depends on the player. But I'm not – Braxton Jones is an impressive kid, and I don't think there's any issue at all with his football character. And he knew coming out of the season what he needed to work on. And, and I had a discussion, might have been a Twitter discussion about, why didn't he do that stuff in school? Why wasn't he ready? I go, man, look where he came from. He came from Southern Utah. He didn't play at Alabama. He didn't play at Georgia. You know what? I mean, what he's being taught, and I'm not talking about just coaching. I'm talking what's going on in the weight room, the facilities in the weight room.
Right.
He wasn't weak. He did 26 or 27 reps at 225, but was he doing all the stuff that was really pertinent to being a pro lineman? Okay, he didn't have, when you watch tape of him when he was in college, you never saw going against, and he played at the FCS level now. He wasn't high Division I. And so he never had a problem with anchoring. He never showed a problem at the Senior Bowl with anchoring. But now he got up here playing against NFL players. He had a problem with anchoring, which tells you he needs to get stronger in the lower body, in the ass and his thighs. And there's stuff he can do. And probably, I said to this person, I said, it wouldn't shock me if he has a 20% gain in lower body strength. You're going to see a totally different player. And I think a lot of it has to do is that he's conscientious enough to know exactly what he has to do.
And Nomad says, I don't want to piss Greg off, but does he think Braxton Jones has the aptitude to transfer to the right side?
I don't know if he might have played a little bit on the right side when he was in college, but if I recall, he was strictly a left guard.
That's what I remember.
To me, it's easy, especially if you're right-handed, because your right hand's down. Leatherwood couldn't do it. Leatherwood was strictly a left tackle at Alabama. When the Raiders put him on the right side, he was terrible. It's like a different player. But most players can do that conversion. Let's say they take Jones from Georgia, just for sake of an argument here. Okay, now you're gonna start the offseason program for rookies starts the 15th of May. And so you're gonna have the 15th of May until roughly the 15th of June. There'll be offseason program practices, OTAs, and minicamp to go through. During that period, the coaches will play both Joneses at right and both Joneses at left. And make a decision. And then go into camp and say, this guy can play one side, this guy can play the other. It's going to be, it's going to be real simple. When you listen to the guy talk, he's a smart kid. He's a very articulate, well-spoken kid. So the aptitude, hell, he played every single snap as a rookie. He's got the aptitude.
Right. Yeah. I love how immediately after a game, reporters would question him, and he self-evaluated himself in such a candid manner and would talk about particular plays where he didn't do the right thing. And sometimes he'd even say, the guard next to me told me to do this and I didn't understand, and so there was miscommunication or whatever. I'm paraphrasing that, but he's just candid and honest and self-reflective, and to do that immediately after the game and talk about what he needed to work on, to me, is very commendable. Hey, Eric Bono has had some interaction with people who have downplayed what Ryan Poles did at Kansas City. He says that there's a lot of people diminishing Ryan Poles' impact on building the offensive line there because he wasn't the GM. Is there any way you can comment on that for Eric?
Yeah, he was a director of player personnel. He was a big, important part of the personnel department.
Yes. Yeah, that's part of what was in his resume and portfolio.
And on top of that, he's a former offensive lineman.
Exactly.
He was in on probably just about every decision that was made.
Yes.
Was in the discussion. Just like Ian Cunningham is in on every discussion that Ryan Poles has.
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from Eric. People are upset with Poles didn't do more to fix the offensive line last season. But again, you got to get back to, scheme fits, traits, and so forth. And so Ryan Poles wasn't going to draft somebody who was a mistake, was an exception, to use Bill Parcells' phrase.
Well, you look at the people, Eldo, you look at the people he drafted. On the offensive line, he drafted 4. I think one got poached, and one who I thought was going to be a pretty good player, a kid from San Diego State. But the one guy got poached. Sorry. They were all very good athletes.
Yep.
Every single one of them, and especially for that position. There was guys playing last year that weren't scheme fits. You got to get by with them. Larry Borum is not a scheme fit. Is Larry Borum good enough? He probably got to drop a little more weight. Is he good enough to be a backup? Yeah. You're always going to be looking to upgrade. Whether it's this year or next year, you still want to upgrade because, he's a vanilla. You can get by with him, but he's not exactly what you want.
Right.
Put him in a different scheme, he might be great. Talking in this scheme.
Got a question here from Victor De Jesus regarding a potential trade. He says, what are the chances the Bears reach back out to Pittsburgh to trade their first pick and number 32 to move up to number 9? The Bears can then target Wright from Tennessee or Clancy from Pittsburgh. So he's saying for the number 9 pick, we would get the 17th pick. Is that from Pittsburgh? Yeah, 17. Yeah, and
they'd owe you more than that.
Yeah,
I've already done that one.
So the Bears should expect to get more than
more. They get more than that. I'd trade 61 for 32.
Okay,
not 53.
Gotcha.
Give them the work. Because if you traded 53, then they even owe you more. But am I taking Wright or Clancy? No. And that would depend on who they took at 17. And if, let's say, now when you get into 17, you're talking a different group of players. One name that jumps out at me, again, it doesn't matter how I have guys rated. It matters how the Bears have them rated. But one is Keon White. And if Keon White was a Chicago Bear, he's going to be a 3 technique. And he's going to be a motherfucker of a 3 technique.
I love it.
In my opinion. He's 285 pounds, he can run, and he's strong. got a great motor, and he can play outside too. But that's my opinion. Then what I would do, again, based on how I got guys ranked, I'd take Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse with that 32 pick, and there's your tackle.
There you go. Yeah, you like that guy. Yeah, and I love how in the Barroom Draft Exclusives, you pronounced his name with that French-Canadian accent.
Matthew Bergeron.
Sounds great to me. I wonder if the Bears radio play-by-play guy would pronounce it that way. All right, let's squeeze in a couple of more here. Gervon Dexter has been getting a lot of attention in the chat room, and Nomad says Gervon Dexter is a better player than DeForest Buckner was at Oregon. His
No way.
is really high. I knew you were going to disagree.
Buckner was a top 10 pick.
Doesn't see it. He doesn't see it, Nomad.
Third rounder, maybe.
I would agree. He's a third rounder.
Maybe gets, but no, he's not Braxton Buckner.
Can you see Gervon? Do you see Gervon moving, potentially playing the 3 tech? He seems too big for me, although he is athletic.
No, he's athletic. No, it's not necessarily size; it's the athleticism. First step, the ability to trade. Yeah, he could do it. Is he exactly what you want? No, but can you get by? I'll tell you, there's a guy. You got the list of the players coming in?
Yeah.
I know the Irish guys. Yeah, there's about 9 names. I'm sure they've already invited all 30, but there's about 9 names that are out there. There's a kid who was a non-combine guy from Pitt, and he was at the top of the Irish Bears podcast.
Irish Bears show, yeah.
Yeah. I can't think of the guy's name, but anyway, he's a non-combine guy. It's about 280 pounds. And you watch tape, and Pitt had a pretty damn good defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
That guy projects to a 3 technique. And I can see why they want to bring him in, because he does project to a 3 technique. 3 techniques got to have some special qualities. You can't just throw a guy in there. You know, he's got to be a penetrator. He's got to be quick off the ball. He's got to have some inside pass rush ability. You know, so Cansey would be ideal. What's scary about Cansey is his arms are this long. You know, and again, I'll repeat it. That's a coaching decision. You know, they're going to say, no, we don't. We got to have a guy with longer arms than that. You know, people will fight it, but you know what? If the coaches say no, they say no.
Right. According to Walter Football, the players who have or are scheduled to visit Hallis Hall are the following. Let's see. Start with Will Anderson, Julius Brents, the cornerback from Kansas State.
Now, they have them on that website. They have them coded. They could have talked to these guys at the combine. They could have.
Let me find that. Hold on, because I saw it through Sports Illustrated. Walter Football. What do you think about those guys over there? Charlie Campbell and I forgot the other guy who runs that site. They seem to have a lot of sources. Do you like those guys?
No, but you know, I think a lot of the stuff they got is full of shit. But,
I love it.
But
see if I can find this. Mock drafts, NFL draft by visits tracker. Okay, so let us scroll down. Let's get rid of the ad first. Scroll down to Chicago Bears, and we got our list here. Wow, it's quite a lengthy list.
Yeah, but see, they got on there. There's a code for each one, and
Yes.
they could have talked to them in an all-star game. You know,
Right.
It might be East-West Senior Bowl, NFLPA. There's the Combine. Could have
Right.
talked to him at his pro day, and then the visit. I've seen, I think, like I say, 9 names, and local kids don't count because the quarterback from Purdue, O'Connell, and the receiver from Michigan State are coming in, and
There we go.
They don't count because they're local.
Right. So the private visits is what we're most interested in, correct?
Right. The 30 visit, the top 30. I hate using the word top 30 because it's not your top 30 players.
Right. Double A from Northwestern, Deslin.
See, he doesn't count. Double A doesn't count because
that's right, because he's local, right? What about Deslin Alexandra, the defensive end from Pitt?
That's the guy I was talking about. He's a non-combine guy that's a projected as I think he was a defensive end for Pitt, but he's played inside. He projects as a 3.
Okay. Will Anderson was at the combine. Julius Brent's at the combine. Jalen Carter, private visit. That's today.
Right.
Jalen Duncan
is a private visit. He's a pretty good tackle from Maryland.
Yeah.
Has played on the right side early in his career. The last few years, he's played on the left. Really improved this year.
Mm-hmm.
He can be a physical guy. You know, he can come in and start as a rookie.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. What about?
I just saw that name, the 3 technique for the kid from Canoe Bet. He's a nose.
Really? Because there's been a lot of discussion about him.
He's a nose. He's a 1 tech.
The quickness that he showed at the Senior Bowl.
I don't care what he showed at the Senior Bowl. He's a nose.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, if you want a profile of Deslin Alexander, Nomad did one here at the bar room. Just tune in tomorrow, and we'll tell you exactly where you can find that. Let's see. Who else is on this list? Private visits. Paris Johnson from Ohio State. Marty Mapu, the safety from Sacramento State. I don't know much about him. Frankly.
I don't know anything about him, but you know, he could be a guy that late round guy, potential UDFA that you want to get a physical on.
Gotcha.
When you bring a guy in, you're required by league laws to give the guy medical. Now, if he's been that's what it's about. And so like for Jalen Carter, he's had the medical at the combine.
Mm-hmm.
His medical today will consist of, has anything happened to you since the combine? Any physical thing? No. Okay, you're good. Basically a little Q&A. But if the guy wasn't at the combine, and you got to give him a complete medical.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I did not know that. All right. Yep. So Jonathan Mingo, the wide receiver from Ole Miss, he's an intriguing candidate, but
he's a big receiver that can run.
Yeah.
Plays doesn't look as fast as he times. He timed pretty good. I don't think he plays that fast.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a good receiver.
Michigan State's Jaden Reed had a fairly good Senior Bowl week.
Jalen Reed is a local kid, so he doesn't count. Mm-hmm. You got the kid from Dontavian Wicks from Virginia is coming in.
Yeah, that's not on this list, but yes.
Yeah, but he's coming in. That is a lock.
Okay. Jackson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver from Ohio State, private visit. Interesting that they would have him. That's the end of the list for the private visits, according to Walter Football. You can go to walterfootball.com to take a longer look at that list. Let's get another couple of questions out of here, and then we'll close this episode. So you already answered this one, Keanu Benton. What about Coble Turner, Zach Pickens, and Carl Brooks? Anything you want to share about those guys?
Pickens, I think maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know Turner and Brooks. I'll have to do. Let me put that down. Carl Brooks, Coble Turner.
Carl Brooks is that defensive end from, I think, is Boston College. Intriguing prospect. Couple of other questions. King wants to know, there was a slight murmur about the Bears trading with Washington for a player and pick. Any truth and for a player and a pick? Any truth to that? Have you heard any mumblings about a potential trade?
No, I mean, you got a lot of stuff going on this type of year that, people on Twitter make up.
That's right. Your source of the most lies, Twitter. There it is. Thank you, J Rock. Brooks is
Oh,
from
Bowling Green. Okay, I know a little bit. Yeah, the Bowling Green guy played at end,
Yes.
and they dominated the MAC. But yeah, he'd be a 3 inside. But I haven't studied him at length to see exactly how good. But yeah, I mean, he was a 300-pound guy that played outside, and you're not gonna play outside in the NFL. He could be a 5 technique in a 3-4 front, and so technically that's outside. But for the Bears, he'd more than likely be a 3.
Interesting. All right. I think that's going to, let's see, we got one last comment here. Foster wants to know defensive line Keandre Hall, 6th-rounder to UDF. Anyone? Do you know much about Keandre Hall? This has been somebody that's been on Foster's radar for a while.
From Pitt State in Kansas?
I believe it is. Let me see.
I've been there, by the way. It's in southeastern Kansas. Way south.
Where haven't you been?
I have been to just about every school in the country that has a football program, at least at the FCS level or better.
Pittsburgh State Gorillas.
I haven't. I've even been to a game at that place.
Really?
Oh yeah, but I have done nothing on him, and I don't have any Pittsburgh State films, so I'm going to have to call my buddy Eric Yelko and send me some Pittsburgh State tape.
All right. So you've got a promise. Next Monday, we will be back here, and Greg has 2 or 3 players to scout based on your suggestions in the chat room. I want to
write this one down, too.
You got it. Keandre Hall. No relation to the, what was his name? The long-armed defensive back the Bears drafted about 70 years ago. He had a similar
He was
name.
from Northern Iowa, that guy.
Yeah, exactly. And see those legs, yeah. So that's our show for today. Later tonight, it is South Burbs Hitmen. Are you a White Sox fan, Greg?
No.
Cubs?
I'm not a big baseball fan. I mean, because I've been in this business my whole adult life. And so, like, you get into spring training and I'm getting ready for a draft and stuff. So I've never been, when I was growing up, I was a Yankee fan because I, lived in New York State. And so if I'm any kind of fan, it's probably the Cubbies because most of the people at Hallis Hall were Cubbies. But I'm not going to tell you I sit and watch every game.
Please don't, unless you need a nap. I love baseball. Well, actually, this new pitcher's clock. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I did, and I think that's the best thing that ever happened to baseball. But it screws up some pitchers big time. And the one guy, he got hit with a ball in the opening game. It used to drive. That's why I didn't watch baseball. Because these guys would get the ball, and it would be, now you got 20 seconds or 15 seconds to get the ball out of your hand. At least start your lineup. Well, these guys would sit around, they'd take off their glove, they'd rub the ball, go grab the rosin bag, walk around. And, it'd be like a minute and a half between each pitch.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and now it's like, bam, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. You got to get ready to go. And, I think it's going to affect some pitchers more than others. But if it speeds up the game, I read somewhere it said 23 minutes. I think it's going to be a lot more than 23 minutes on average when they get done.
I hope so. And so there's big controversy now that some fans are saying, I liked it better the way it was because I was at the ballpark for 3.5 hours as opposed to the 2 hours that I'm at now. I don't feel like I'm getting my money's worth. It's like, please don't tell me you want to sit and watch baseball for
Put it this way:
hours.
as slow as the game was, Guy could come up, throw his first pitch. You could leave, go to the bathroom, take a leak, go get a beer, and come back, and he'd only be on his third pitch.
That's right. The only thing that you would miss is the guy scratching his nuts or
right. See, all that shit's gone now.
Don Burr, Lions fan, wants to know if you will be at the Lions Super Bowl parade.
Never.
Enough said. South Burbs Hitman tonight and more football tomorrow here in the Barroom Network. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll get all the alerts letting you know when we're live. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Greg.
Okay, guys. See you later.